The quiet street and the loud mistake. The street was quiet, lined with tall trees that swayed softly in the early morning breeze. Birds chirped on branches, and a few early risers watered their lawns or sipped coffee on porches. On that calm morning, no one expected anything unusual to happen. Certainly not Helen Reeves. Helen Reeves was 73 years old. Her back was slightly bent from age, but her spirit stood tall. She had silver hair tied in a neat bun and wore a soft blue sweater that her son had bought her the previous winter. Every Saturday morning, she walked 2 blocks to the farmer's market with a reusable tote in one hand and a warm smile for everyone she passed. Helen had lived in that neighborhood for over 20 years. She knew every crack on the sidewalk, every face on the street. But this morning, as she stepped off the curb to cross toward the market, a police car slowed beside her. She noticed it but didn't think much. Maybe they were patrolling, but the car stopped completely. A loud voice came from the passenger side. "Ma'am, please stop right there." Helen paused, confused. She turned, smiling gently. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked politely. The officer stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. His nameplate read, S. Danvers. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" he asked, voice sharp. Helen's smile faltered. "I live just down the road. I'm on my way to the market." "You live here?" he repeated, as if it were impossible. "Can I see some ID?" "Of course," Helen said, reaching slowly into her sweater pocket. "I carry my ID with me." But as she pulled out her wallet, the officer took a sudden step forward. "Don't move too fast," he barked. "Keep your hands where I can see them." She froze, startled. Her voice trembled. "I was just getting my ID." By now, neighbors had started to peek through curtains. A jogger slowed to a stop. Confusion spread among them. This was Helen. Gentle, kind, quiet Helen who never harmed anyone. Officer Danvers took her wallet and examined her ID. His eyebrows raised for a second when he read the name Helen Reeves. But he said nothing. Instead, he grabbed her wrist. "You're coming with me." "What?" "Why?" Helen gasped. "You're under investigation," he said vaguely, not offering any details. Helen's heart raced. "I haven't done anything wrong." He ignored her words. With cold efficiency, he cuffed her hands behind her back. Her tote, bag dropped to the pavement. A few apples rolled out and bumped against the curb. "Someone call her son," shouted a neighbor from across the street. "Yeah, this is crazy," added another. But Officer Danvers was unmoved. He pushed Helen gently but firmly toward the patrol car. From a nearby porch, an elderly man pulled out his phone and began filming. As Helen was placed in the back of the car, the sun shone brightly through the window. She looked out, confused, scared, and heartbroken. The drive to the station was silent except for the crackle of the radio. Inside the car, Officer Danvers muttered to himself. Should have known someone like her didn't belong around here. Dressed too nice, acting too confident. He didn't realize Helen had heard him. At the station, she was fingerprinted and asked to sit in a holding room. It was cold, the bench was hard, and the walls were painted a dull gray. Time passed slowly. Every minute felt like an hour. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from disbelief. Meanwhile, at a quiet home a few miles away, Keanu Reeves was enjoying a rare day off. He was in his kitchen making tea when his phone buzzed. The screen showed a message from Mrs. Simmons, a neighbor and longtime friend of the family. The message read, "Keanu, I don't want to alarm you, but your mom was just taken by a cop. We're all shocked. People filmed it. I don't know why. Please check in." Keanu's hands froze. The mug slipped from his grip and shattered on the floor. Without a second thought, he grabbed his jacket and keys and rushed out the door. He didn't care about press. He didn't care about cameras. All he cared about was his mother. His car sped through the streets. He made a call to his assistant. "Get me every detail, now." By the time he reached the station, the sun had climbed higher in the sky. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. He walked through the front doors and headed straight to the front desk. "I'm here to see Helen Reeves," he said. The young officer at the desk blinked. Who's asking?" Her son, Keanu replied. Keanu Reeves, the officer stammered. Oh, of course, sir. Let me check. Minutes later, another officer led him down the hallway. As he walked, every officer who recognized him paused. Some whispered. Others turned away, ashamed. Keanu reached the holding room. The door opened. Helen looked up, her eyes filled with relief and pain. Keanu... He rushed to her side, taking her hands gently. I'm here, Mom. I'm here. They said I did something wrong. I don't even understand why. You didn't, he said softly. I'm going to fix this. Behind him, Officer Danvers stepped into the room. His eyes widened when he saw Keanu. You're her son? Keanu turned slowly. Yes, and you made a very big mistake. Truth behind the badge. The room felt like it had no air. The silence between Keanu and Officer Danvers was thick, almost heavy enough to touch. Helen sat between them, her tired eyes moving from her son to the officer who had cuffed her like a criminal just hours earlier. Officer Danvers cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. I was following protocol, he said. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm tone made every word sharper. You arrested an elderly woman on her morning walk. You didn't explain the charge. You treated her like she was a threat. All because... What? She didn't look like someone who should live in that neighborhood? The officer shifted uncomfortably. I thought she was suspicious. There were recent reports of scams in that area. I had to act. Keanu looked at his mother. She was shivering, more from betrayal than cold. Your job is to protect, not to assume, Keanu said. You didn't just arrest a woman. You humiliated a human being, a kind, generous woman who's never even gotten a parking ticket. Officer Danvers tried to explain more, but Keanu raised his hand. Enough. I don't want an apology. I want accountability. He turned to the desk sergeant. I want to file a formal complaint. I want body cam footage, and I want internal affairs involved. Officer Danvers paled. He hadn't expected this. He thought he could smooth it over, maybe blame paperwork or confusion. But now Keanu Reeves, someone the world respected, was demanding real answers. Mr. Reeves, the sergeant said quietly, we'll cooperate fully. Please give us time to gather all evidence. Keanu nodded. He helped his mother up and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Let's go home, Mom. As they walked out of the station, reporters had already gathered. Someone had leaked the arrest. Cameras clicked, questions flew, but Keanu didn't stop. He opened the door for his mother and drove away, ignoring the flashing lights and shouting voices. Inside the car, Helen was quiet for a long time. Do you think this would have happened if I didn't have gray hair? Or if I looked different? She asked. Keanu sighed. Maybe not. Some people see skin, not stories. But I'll make sure they hear yours. Back at home, Keanu helped her inside. He made her tea and tucked a blanket around her shoulders. Then he picked up his phone and made a series of calls, first to his legal team, then to a civil rights group he often donated to. Finally, he called a journalist he trusted. By that evening, the story was everywhere. Not just the arrest, but the real story. How a respected woman was handcuffed on the street she had lived on for decades. How a mistake by one officer sparked a deeper conversation. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Tart Justice for Helen and Rain Respect Elderly began trending. People from all over the world wrote messages of support. Celebrities, fans, strangers. Everyone had something to say. One tweet read, "If it can happen to Keanu Reeves' mom, it can happen to anyone's. This isn't about fame. It's about dignity." Meanwhile, Officer Danvers sat in his small apartment staring at the news. He read every comment, watched every video, and for the first time in years he questioned himself. His phone rang. It was a call from Internal Affairs. He picked it up with a shaking hand. "Officer Danvers, we need you to come in tomorrow morning. Bring your body cam. We'll be opening a full investigation." The next day, Keanu met with a group of civil rights lawyers. They offered to help press charges and shine a light on unfair police practices. Keanu listened carefully. "I'm not doing this for revenge," he said. "I'm doing it so no one's mother, father, or child has to feel like mine did." Meanwhile, Helen returned to the farmer's market. This time she wasn't walking alone. As she approached, people clapped softly. The vendors gave her free fruit. A little girl ran up and gave her a flower. "You're a hero," the girl whispered. Helen smiled but shook her head gently. "I'm not a hero, sweetie. I just want to live in a world where being kind is enough." Later that day, Officer Danvers entered a small gray room at headquarters. Across the table sat two investigators. His body cam footage played on a screen between them. As they watched the arrest, the tone of his voice, the way he grabbed her wrist, their expressions grew more serious. "Do you see any threat here?" one investigator asked. Danvers looked down. "No, I don't." "Do you realize the damage done?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I do now." The investigator paused the footage. "You'll be placed on unpaid leave while we complete the review. This isn't about one incident. We've had 3 other complaints. None reached the media. Until now." Danvers stood up slowly. "I understand." Outside, the press waited. Danvers didn't speak. He just walked to his car, feeling like the world had turned upside down. And maybe it had. Or maybe he was finally seeing it clearly. That evening, Keanu sat with his mother on their back porch. The sun was setting, turning the sky orange and gold. "Are you okay now?" he asked her. "I will be," she said. "It hurt. But look how many people stood up for me. I didn't expect that." "You taught me to stand up," Keanu said. "Now I'm just returning the lesson." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the breeze rustling the trees. Far away, the world continued to talk about what happened. News anchors, teachers, families. One moment of injustice had turned into a movement of awareness. But for Keanu and Helen, the most powerful moment was that quiet porch, where respect and love spoke louder than any camera ever could. Louder than silence. Days passed, but the world didn't forget. Helen's story had started as a quiet injustice on a tree-lined street, but now it was echoing across TV screens and phones all over the world. And while many people were just angry, Keanu Reeves had a deeper purpose. Keanu knew this wasn't only about his mother. Her arrest had pulled back a curtain hiding years of quiet prejudice, especially against the elderly, against people judged by their appearance, their skin, their age. He began reaching out to community leaders, not for fame, but for change. "I don't want a protest," he told a local reverend. "I want a conversation. People yelling at each other doesn't fix anything. People listening to each other does." He was invited to a town hall the following Saturday. It wasn't filmed, no press. Just families, police officers, store owners, teachers, kids, and grandparents, many of whom knew Helen personally. Helen came too. She wore her same blue sweater, as if to say she wasn't hiding. She stood, up first, her voice quiet but steady. "I was arrested for looking like I didn't belong," she said. "But I've lived here longer than most of you. I know your kids. I helped raise your gardens. And I forgive the officer who did this. But forgiveness doesn't mean silence." The room was still. Then a teenager stood. "My brother got stopped last week walking home from school. They asked if he stole his own backpack." A young woman added, "My dad wears old clothes because he works construction. They think he's homeless." A retired officer spoke next. "We weren't trained to understand people, just to spot danger. And sometimes, we get it wrong." "I'm sorry, we've been quiet too long." Keanu finally stood. His voice was calm, but it filled the room. "My mother gave me 3 lessons as a child. Respect people, stay humble, and never be afraid to speak the truth. We need those 3 things. Now more than ever." Someone clapped. Then the whole room joined in. Later, walking home with his mother, Keanu said, "I think this is only the beginning." He was right. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs had finished reviewing Officer Danvers' case. They found that not only had he acted out of bias, but that he had received 2 written warnings before for similar behavior. Nothing had been done. They suspended him without pay and recommended he attend a full retraining program. one that focused on empathy, understanding, and reform. Many people thought Keanu would push for his firing, but he didn't. Instead, Keanu requested something else. Let him meet the people he hurt, he said. Not just my mom. Let him sit with the families he judged. Let him listen, not for punishment, but for change. Reluctantly, the station agreed. And so, one afternoon, Officer Danvers sat alone in a room. One by one, people walked in. Not yelling, not accusing, just sharing. A boy talked about being followed in a store. A woman cried about being stopped with her daughter in the car. An old man said, "I served this country, and they still ask me why I'm here." By the end, Officer Danvers looked different, not just tired, not just embarrassed, but changed. He stood slowly and said something no one expected. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I will earn it." Word of his change spread. Some people didn't believe it. Others called it fake. But Keanu believed people could grow. And so did Helen, back at home. Helen returned to her usual routine. She still went to the market. Still smiled at neighbors. But now strangers smiled too. Some stopped to thank her. Others asked if they could hug her. One morning, a mother approached her with a young girl. "This is Mia," the mother said. She was scared of police before. She thought they were all mean. But I told her your story. Now she knows people can stand up for what's right. Helen knelt down and smiled at Mia. "Remember, sweetheart, one voice can change a room, and if enough people speak, they can change the world." Across town, Keanu was sitting for a televised interview. He had been invited not as a celebrity, but as a son. "What do you hope comes from this?" the interviewer asked. "Honestly," Keanu said, "I hope the next time someone sees an elderly woman walking down the street, they don't see a stranger. They see someone's mother, someone who matters." He paused. "And maybe, just maybe, we learn to ask before we judge." The interview was watched by millions, and while not everyone agreed on every detail, most agreed on one thing: something needed to change. As the week went on, Keanu and his mother began to receive letters from all over the country, some handwritten, others typed. A soldier in Texas wrote, "My mom went through something like this. I never spoke up, but you did. Thank you." A woman in Canada wrote, "Helen, you are stronger than most people twice your age. The world is better because of you." But one letter stood out. It was from Officer Danvers. It read, "Dear Helen, I've watched your speech 10 times. I've heard your voice in my head every day. I've joined the training program and volunteered at a local center. Not to earn praise, but because I want to do better. I failed you, but you gave me a second chance. Thank you for that. Sincerely, Stephen Danvers." Helen read the letter twice. Then she folded it gently and placed it in her drawer. "Some people break," she said softly. "Others bend. But the ones who bend can learn how to stand up straighter." Keanu smiled. "You're teaching more people than you know." They walked to the porch again that evening. The same breeze, the same trees. But the world felt lighter. Injustice had knocked loudly. But love, courage, and truth had answered louder. The story spreads wider. 2 weeks had passed since Helen Reeves was wrongfully arrested. 2 weeks since her quiet walk to the market turned into something the world could not ignore. Her story had sparked more than anger. It had sparked a movement. And now that movement was beginning to take root far beyond their small neighborhood. It started with a school. At Lincoln Elementary, just a few blocks from Helen's home, a teacher named Mrs. Porter decided to change her lesson plan. Instead of starting the week with math drills, she stood in front of her 4th graders and said, "Today we're going to talk about kindness and about how to treat people who are different from us." She showed them a picture of Helen and told them the story, not the celebrity version, but the real one. How a gentle, older woman had been judged unfairly, how her son had stood by her, and how the community rose to say, "This is not okay, Theo." Children listened with wide eyes. A little boy raised his hand. "Why did the police think she was bad?" Ms. Porter looked him in the eye. Sometimes people are taught to fear others just because they look different or dress differently or walk with slower steps. But that doesn't make it right. That's why we're talking about it. After class, the kids drew pictures for Helen, hearts, flowers, and messages like, "You are loved and you matter." Keanu came to the school to pick them up. When he walked into the classroom, the kids gasped, "Whoa, John Wick!" Keanu laughed gently. "Today, I'm not John Wick, I'm just Helen's son." He read every note the children had made. "These mean more than you know," he said. "Thank you for making my mom smile." Helen cried softly when she saw the pictures. She placed them on the wall near her kitchen, where she could see them every morning. Across the country, churches began holding community dinners, inviting police officers and families to sit together, share meals, and talk. Not to fight. Not to argue. Just to listen. One pastor said, "If we can break bread together, maybe we can also break old habits." Keanu kept his focus steady. He turned down acting roles, turned down late-night interviews. He told his agent, "This is more important than a movie." He used his time to help pass a new proposal to improve police training. It included mandatory empathy workshops, community history classes, and a rotation where officers worked alongside senior citizens and youth groups. At first, there was resistance. "Actors don't know how we do our jobs," said one officer at a public forum. Keanu stood up calmly. "I'm not speaking as an actor. I'm speaking as a son. And someday you might be too." Silence filled the room, and then applause. The bill passed unanimously in 3 cities within a month. More cities prepared to adopt it. It was called the Helen Reeves Initiative. Meanwhile, Officer Danvers continued his retraining. Not everyone accepted his change. Some said he was just saving face, but he kept showing up, kept asking questions, kept listening. He spent a day at a local nursing home, helping elderly people write letters, eat their meals, and take short walks. One woman there looked him in the eye and said, "You remind me of a boy who arrested my friend for walking too slow." Danvers swallowed hard. "I was that boy," he said, "and I'm sorry." She stared at him for a long moment, then patted his hand gently. "At least you're here now." Back in Helen's neighborhood, change was showing in small ways. The corner store that used to follow teenagers around now offered free snacks to local kids every Saturday. A group of officers walked the neighborhood without cars, just talking to people, shaking hands, asking how they could help. One morning, Helen opened her door to find Officer Danvers standing outside holding a potted plant. "May I come in?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. They sat in her living room, the same room where she had once sat, trembling, just hours after being released from holding. "I wanted to say this to you face to face," Danvers began. "I was wrong, not just in action, in my mindset. I didn't see you. I saw a stranger. And that's not what I signed up to be. I let the badge become a wall instead of a bridge, and I'm sorry." Helen studied him. His voice wasn't defensive, it was sincere. There was shame in his eyes, but also hope. "Thank you," she said simply. He placed the plant on the table. "This is a peace lily. It only blooms when you take care of it. Then we'll take care of it together," Helen said softly. Keanu came in moments later, surprised to see Danvers there. But when he saw the plant and the expression on his mother's face, he simply nodded. "Good start," he said. That night, Keanu posted a single sentence to his millions of followers. "Real justice is not just punishment, it's progress." The post went viral. A magazine put Helen on the cover, not as Keanu Reeves' mother, but as Helen, the woman who sparked a national conversation. She laughed when she saw it. "They made me look younger," she joked. Keanu chuckled. "Well, now they know the real star of the family." Helen looked out the window. The sky was pink, just before dusk. "Do you think this will last?" she asked. Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It will if we keep walking." She smiled. Then let's never stop. Lessons on the road. The world had changed for Helen Reeves, but she hadn't let it change her. She still went to the market every Saturday. She still fed the birds near her porch. She still spoke gently, smiled warmly, and believed that people could be better, because she had seen it happen. But the story didn't end with her neighborhood. Keanu had begun receiving letters from small towns and big cities, from teachers, community leaders, and even police departments across the country. They weren't asking for autographs. They were asking for guidance. Can you visit our city? Can Helen talk to our students? Can you help us rebuild trust here? Keanu sat with his mother one evening and shared the letters. They're not asking for speeches, he said. They're asking for hope. Helen sipped her tea and looked thoughtful. Then let's give it to them. And so began what they called the Respect and Kindness Road Tour. Keanu rented a modest RV, nothing fancy, and painted one simple message across the side. We all belong. He drove, and Helen sat beside him with her tote bag and a stack of letters. Sometimes the road was long and bumpy. Sometimes they got lost. Once they had to sleep in a gas station parking lot when their RV broke down. But every stop was worth it. They visited schools where students hugged Helen like she was their grandmother. They sat in town halls where retired officers apologized for past mistakes. They held quiet meetings in parks and loud conversations in churches. In Kansas, a 10-year-old boy stood up during a school assembly and said, "My uncle says mean things about people he doesn't know, but after hearing your story, I asked him why." He didn't have an answer. In Ohio, a police chief pulled Keanu aside and whispered, "I was trained to be tough, but now I see that being kind takes more strength." In Mississippi, Helen was invited to speak at a senior center. Halfway through her story, an elderly man began crying softly. Afterward, he told her, "I grew up thinking some people didn't matter, but when they put cuffs on you, something broke inside me, because I saw my own wife in your face." Helen placed her hand over his and said, "Then let's help fix what's broken." Meanwhile, media coverage had shifted. This wasn't about celebrity anymore. It was about connection. Major news outlets began calling it the Reeves revival. Headlines read, "Elderly woman and son lead compassion movement from arrest to awakening. Helen's quiet revolution. Keanu puts career on hold to travel with his hero, his mom." But not everyone was supportive. Some critics accused Keanu of virtue signaling. Others claimed it was all for the cameras. One morning, they were met with protesters outside a high school event. A man shouted, "Go back to Hollywood. No one wants your lectures." Helen didn't flinch. She walked right up to him and offered a cookie from a tin she had baked that morning. "You don't have to agree with me," she said gently. "But if you're angry, you probably need this more than anyone." The man stared at her, stunned. He took the cookie, didn't say a word. But hours later, he returned and left a note on her RV window. "I judged you too fast. Your kindness hit me harder than any argument ever could." Keanu read the note and smiled. "That's your superpower, Mom." Helen chuckled. "No, that's just sugar and patience." After 5 weeks on the road, they returned home. The RV was dusty. Helen was tired. Keanu had grown a bit of a beard, but their hearts were full. They had spoken in 16 towns and cities, met over 3,000 people, and inspired dozens of communities to start their own conversations. As soon as they arrived, the neighborhood gathered for a welcome home celebration. Children held signs that said, "Welcome back, Helen," and "Thank you, Keanu." Officer Danvers was there too, not in uniform, just as a neighbor. He approached them with a shy smile. "I started a support group for new officers. We talk about empathy and accountability. I call it Bridges Over Badges." Keanu shook his hand. "That's a good name." Helen hugged him. "Thank you for not giving up." A few weeks later, Helen received an unexpected letter from the governor's office. They wanted to honor her at the state capitol, not for being famous, but for being brave. At the ceremony, she stood on a small stage. Keanu sat in the front row, his eyes never leaving her. The governor read aloud, for reminding us that dignity has no age, that kindness is a strength, and that even in silence, a soft voice can stir a nation. Helen Reeves, we honor you. People clapped. Some wiped tears. Helen stepped up to the microphone. I didn't mean to start anything, she said softly. I was just going to the market. Laughter broke the tension. But maybe that's the point. Change doesn't need a big speech. It starts when one person says, "This isn't right," and another says, "I hear you." She looked down at Keanu. My son heard me. And then the world did too. The applause was deafening. Outside the building, a reporter asked Keanu, "What's next for you?" He looked up at the sky and thought for a moment. We rest. Then we keep going. He paused. Because every street has a Helen. And every Helen deserves to be seen. Where hope walks, the sun rose gently over Helen's neighborhood, painting soft light over the same sidewalk where she had once been handcuffed without reason. Birds chirped, wind rustled through the trees, and life continued. But it was not the same. Something had changed. It had been nearly 3 months since the arrest. The story that started with shame had unfolded into a national conversation. From grocery stores to government halls, people were finally asking harder questions and listening to quieter voices. Helen Reeves had become a symbol, not because she sought attention, but because she had handled injustice with grace. She had shown the world that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. And now, on this quiet morning, she was preparing for something she never expected. A walk. Not just any walk. The city had declared this day the first annual walk, with Helen, a peaceful community march focused on unity, awareness, and respect for the elderly, for the unheard, and for those too often overlooked. The starting point? The very spot where she had been arrested. Keanu Reeves helped her put on her shoes. Are you sure you want to do this, Mom? He asked. She smiled at him gently. I walked to the market for 20 years. I'm not going to stop now. Keanu chuckled. You're braver than me. You just fight in movies, she teased. I fight with muffins and a smile. As they stepped outside, they were greeted by a sea of people. Some held signs that said, "We walk with Helen." Others wore t-shirts that read, "Dignity has no age." And many simply held hands. Among them were teachers, officers, children, elderly couples, nurses, and even former critics who had come to show support. Officer Danvers stood near the back, not in uniform, holding a sign that read, "Healing is walking together." Helen took the first step, and the crowd followed. They walked in silence at first, not because they were unsure, but because some things are too sacred for noise. As they passed the corner store, the owner waved and handed out free water bottles. As they passed the police station, officers stood outside and nodded respectfully. When they reached the market, children handed Helen fresh flowers. She accepted them all with shaking hands and a grateful smile. Then, on a small stage set up nearby, Keanu took the microphone. He looked over the crowd, then back at his mother, who stood quietly at his side. A few months ago, he began, someone thought my mother didn't belong. Today all of you showed just how wrong that was. Cheers rose from the crowd. He continued, this isn't about one arrest. It's about how we see each other, how we treat people who don't speak loud or dress flashy or walk fast. This is about learning to slow down and see the human first. He turned to Helen. You taught me that. And now the world is learning it too. The crowd clapped again, some wiping tears. Helen stepped up, taking the mic slowly. I never wanted to be famous, she said softly. I just wanted to buy tomatoes without being judged. Laughter spread, warm and kind. But maybe this happened for a reason. Maybe we needed to look at each other and ask, what am I assuming? Because assumptions hurt, and listening heals. She paused. Thank you for walking with me today. I hope you walk with others tomorrow. Later that evening, after the crowd had gone and the signs were packed away, Helen and Keanu sat on the porch once more. The peace lily Danvers had given her now bloomed with white petals. Keanu leaned back, looking at the stars. You changed the world, he said. No, she replied. The world just needed a reminder. Sometimes a whisper does more than a shout. Do you think things will really stay changed? He asked. Helen thought for a moment. Only if we keep walking, not in marches, but in our choices, in how we talk to the cashier, how we wait for the elderly to cross the street, how we correct our children when they judge before knowing. He nodded. Then we keep walking. A few weeks later, a new policy rolled out in the city. It required all new officers to complete empathy immersion, working alongside elderly volunteers, listening to community stories, and taking a silent walk in their shoes. It was called the Reeves Protocol. Schools began using Helen's story as a lesson in social studies. A popular documentary titled More Than a Walk premiered online, covering her journey. It reached millions in just days. In the final scene of the film, Helen sits quietly on her porch sipping tea, birds chirping in the background. She says only one sentence. I never wanted attention. I just wanted people to slow down and see each other. Fade to black. Meanwhile, in small towns and big cities, people walked, not just for Helen, but for their neighbors, their mothers, their friends. And every now and then, someone would tie a blue ribbon to a bench, a tree, or a lamppost, just like Helen's sweater. It became a quiet symbol, not of protest, but of patience, not of anger, but of awareness. Keanu returned to acting eventually, but something in him had shifted. He started a foundation focused on elderly rights and community empathy. He called it Helen's Voice. And even as years passed, every Saturday morning, if you happened to be walking near that small neighborhood, you'd still see a silver-haired woman with a tote bag, smiling at strangers and waving at neighbors, walking not just to the market, but toward a better world.